Welcome to SLP Full Disclosure Podcast. I am your host, Michelle, and I am super excited to be joining you guys today. In today's episode, I'm going to share a little bit about who I am, where I've been in my professional career, and really what has led me to this point in my life. And to be honest, I never thought that I would be sitting behind my computer and doing a podcast. Like that was the farthest thing from my mind even 6 months ago. But here I am with all of you guys today, and I'm very excited to get started, even though I am very nervous because this is super outside my comfort zone, but that's okay. I think that one of the questions they asked me when we first started this podcast journey was I can't remember who asked me in the interview was, how do you want to make this podcast unique and special to you? And immediately I thought, I want it to be helpful and I want it to be useful, but I also want it to be fun. I want SLPs, I want parents, I want anyone who is working with children in any arena to be able to listen to these podcasts and take something away from each episode that they can implement into their therapeutic sessions, whether it be birth to three, school age to high school, typical children where you're working on your run of the mill articulation and language, or if you're working with those multi-handicapped students who can also be very difficult, and finding ways to boost that progress. So, we're going to be covering a lot of fun topics. I have some ideas. My passion, which you will learn very early on, is child development and early child language. Birth to three, parent training, parent coaching, early intervention, inclusive preschool programs for everyone. I think it's fantastic. So you're going to be hearing a lot about that, but I've got lots of ideas and lots of things that I want to talk about on this podcast. So I'm super excited for you guys to join me. And let's get started about who I am. So, I have been practicing speech language pathology for 25 years, and it's crazy to think that I've been practicing that long. Um, I became a speech pathologist kind of by accident, honestly. When I was in college, I went to Ole Miss, and initially my major was pre-dent because my brother is a dentist, and so I thought, well, that's what he's doing, so maybe I'll do the same thing. So about a year, maybe a year and a half in, I decided that the chemistry was just way too much. Me and chemistry, we did not get along. So I was quickly looking to see what is it that I'm going to do with my life. I can't stay at Ole Miss forever. Although I did take a victory lap, which was a great year, but that's beside the point. That was super fun because if you know anything about Ole Miss, you know we've never lost a party and probably never will. Hence the 5th year in the victory lap. But when I was in college, I had to work full time. My background and my family, we just couldn't afford to send me to college. So I had to work full time. And I worked 40 hours a week and went to school full time. And I even still had a really good time. But I worked at a facility I initially started as a direct care worker in an adolescent male cottage working with men who were basically my age because I was 18, 19 years old, and even up to their late 30s. And it was a residential facility, helping them with daily routines, bathing, dressing, feeding, household chores, those kinds of things. And after doing that for about a year, I transferred to the aquatic therapy, to the recreational therapy department, and I became an aquatic therapist. So, growing up, since I was 15, my very first job, I was a swimming instructor. So, I've been teaching swim lessons forever. So, I thought, well, that will be super fun. I'll get to swim, I'll get to play in the pool all day, every day. And in that arena is when I really started to get to work with other professionals. So, there were people that I worked with who had their degrees in recreation and all sorts of different things, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech language pathology, the psychologist, all of those people, certified teachers. This facility, their school, these residents went to school on campus and had certified special education teachers there. We also had a work program there, so I was able to do that. And again, this was way long ago. That was really when the augmentative communication started to really boom. And I fell in love with it because the men that I worked with in the cottage, a lot of them had no way to communicate. So I'm old. I was born in the 70s, and a lot of these men were born in the 60s, some of them even in the late 50s. And so back then, there wasn't a lot out there for individuals with disabilities, individuals who had cognitive delays, physical delays. So the majority of these men that I worked with had little to no communication. So I was able to work with this speech language pathologist, and I was like, this, and it was immediate. The first time I spent time with her, I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. So I immediately changed my major and I started taking classes, and I started with the phonics. I started with the child development and all of those things, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And I learned that it came very easily to me. So when I changed my major, I didn't have to study as much. So when I was pre-dent, when I first got to Ole Miss, I was studying all the time because classes were hard. Not that communicative disorders classes are not hard. They are hard, but it was just natural for me and it made sense. So that's where my journey started. I finished my degree at Ole Miss and I decided I was about to get married, and I moved to Orlando and I finished my master's degree at the University of Central Florida. While I was in school at UCF, I was working as part of the consortium program. They had a consortium program where I was able to work with the school district. I did have to take the praxis or whatever that test is to get my teaching license. So I had an actual Florida teaching license that I worked under as a speech language therapist. And I finished my degree in 1999. I immediately started my clinical fellowship year, which all of you new speechies out there know that that is a very stressful time working under the guidance of a licensed speech pathologist. But I had an amazing mentor. And then about 6 months in, I had my daughter. So I had a brand new baby. I had not finished my CFY yet. And we decided that we were going to move from Florida back to Alabama so that we could be closer to family because we had a brand new baby. So that's what we did. I was very fortunate and was able to stay at home with my daughter for a year before I went back and finished my CFY. And it's funny because during that year, I look back now and I think, gosh, if I had known then what I know now, because I was very new in my career. I had just graduated. But even then, I was still doing things with her all day long. I was like doing therapy with her. We were tracking and we were crossing midline and we were sitting up. She walked at 9 months and she was, fully able to swim when she was 10 months old. So she was a very gross motor oriented child, but her language skills and her verbal skills were also incredible because I did therapy with her all day because I was the crazy mom. But I finished, I went back to work when she was a little over a year old. And when I went back to work, I learned that I was a much better mother because we were not together all the time. So, all you moms out there that are listening, just know you don't have to spend 24 hours a day with your baby. That's okay. It's good to have some separation. And I learned that the hard way. I was with her every day, all day long, sun up to sundown. And at 15 months old, she and I were starting to butt heads. So, I went back to work and I finished my CFY and I was working in early intervention, birth to three, which that's my passion. That's what I love. My daughter was able to attend the facility where I was working in early intervention in their inclusive preschool program. And the benefits of that program for my child, who was a typically developing child, are insurmountable. I just cannot express the importance of early childhood and preschool programs and those inclusive programs for those children who do have disabilities to have the peer role model of their peers. My daughter became really good friends with a little girl, and I'm gonna say her name because I am definitely going to have her as a guest on this show. Her name is Mary, and she will tell you now as an adult, she's my daughter's age, 24, 25. She will tell you and tell anyone as an adult that my daughter, Mia, taught her how to walk. Because every time they would come and get her to go to physical therapy, she would scream like the PT was cutting her toes off. And so my daughter Mia would go with her to PT every single week, and she remembers it vividly. So it was an amazing experience. And that's really where I started to understand and grow in my expertise in child development because it was the first time in that setting that I had worked with other professionals. And working with OT, working with PT, working with those teachers of visually impaired. We even had a music therapist, which was phenomenal. And I had never heard of music therapy. So being able to work with them, and that's really where I learned in that setting in early intervention that I can't just have a good mastery and a good knowledge of speech and language. I also have to know other areas as well. So looking at those other 5 areas of development in children, I've got to be aware of what's typical and what's not typical as well, because as a therapist, as a child development specialist, being able to understand what's typical is so important because without that, you're not able to decipher and look and say what's not typical. So, my career continued to grow. My daughter, I was there in early intervention for several years. And my daughter started kindergarten, and I wanted to be on a more similar schedule to her. And that is when I transferred over to the school system there in Alabama. And that's where I stayed for 18 years, which is going to get me to how I became a travel therapist with AMN. I'm going to get there, I promise. So I was there for 18 years, primarily multi-handicapped unit. And for those of you who work with that population, you know that the progress is slow. But when you do see progress, even those little things, it's it's amazing. And I knew that my daughter was inching closer to graduation, and when she left and went off to school, I was gonna be an empty nester, and it's just me. She's my only kid, and it was just me. And so I geared myself up. I was like, "I'm gonna do this. I can do this. I'm gonna do it." And I researched and I talked about it and I told Mia about it, and she was like, "Yeah, mom, that's great. That's what you need to do." So 20 and when I tell you I communicated with Elle regularly via email, we talked on the phone. She told me what the process was, what it looked like, all the things. And I said, "Okay, Mia graduates from high school in 2018, and that I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it." Well, 2018 rolls around, Mia graduates from high school, and I chickened out. I was like, "I can't do it. I can't." Like, I was so afraid. If I can give anyone any advice at my age, if it scares you and excites you at the same time, you freaking need to do it. Like, you've gotta do it. Don't let fear hold you back. You've gotta do it. Just take a leap of faith and do it, because this journey with AMN has been the most magnificent decision I could have ever possibly made in my life. The people that I've met along the way, the growth and the knowledge that I've gained in my profession, I can't explain it. So 2018 rolls around. I'm like, "I can't do it." I chickened out. Mia goes off to school. I'm by myself. I end up contracting with an early intervention program because at the time I was the preschool coordinator. I wasn't even working in speech anymore. I was a preschool coordinator for a large district in Alabama because they got in a bind, and I helped them out for that year. And I was contracting with early intervention because I was getting home from work at 3 o'clock every day, and it was just me and the dog, and I had nothing to do, and I was bored. And I was like, there's got to be something more out there. There's got to be something more. And boy, was there something more. So I reached out to Elle at Christmas and I said, I'm going to do it. I'm ready. I'm going to put my house on the market. I prayed the boldest prayer I have ever prayed in my entire life. And I was like, God, if this house sells, then you want me to go, and I'll go. Simple as that. If the house doesn't sell, then you want me to stay here for a reason, and this is where you want me to be. And that's good too. I'm good with either way. Well, in about 5 or 6 weeks, I had a full offer contract on my house. So God was very clear in his decision. You've got to go. I want you to do this. There's something more out there for you. So I sold my house in May, and in August, I moved to Baltimore, Maryland, 17 hours away from my family, my friends, and I knew no one, absolutely no one. And I was very blessed that in Maryland, they do early intervention through the school district. So I was a school SLP, but I was working with that birth to 3 population. Again, that's my heart. So I was like, I'm going to get up there and I'm not going to have anything in common with these people. I'm a Southerner. I say y'all. I've got this accent. They're going to be 25 years old. I'm going to have nothing in common with them. And it's going to be horrible. And I'm going to be 17 hours away from my daughter, my family, my brother, my sister in law. And it's going to be bad. When I tell you that I cannot imagine my life now without those women that I met in Maryland, I actually had a group phone call with two of them this morning. I have driven from Baltimore, Maryland to Denver, Colorado to help one of my friends move her entire family, her husband, her 4 children, her dog, her guineas, her lizards, all the animals, all the things. We drove for 3 days from Baltimore to Denver, Colorado. I can't imagine my life without these women. It was the most magnificent experience of my life, and I loved it. So I was there in Baltimore, and I even extended my contract after a year. I was like, I want to be here. I want to stay here. Mia was in school. She was thriving. She was doing all the things. She was able to fly up. We went to New York City. We rode the train. We did all the things, and we made amazing memories. And then I think we all know what happened. COVID happened, and it pretty much stopped everyone's lives. So I was actually in Houston, Texas when COVID hit, and I was at the rodeo that ended up getting canceled. And so when everything shut down, I was able, and we went virtual for the first time. I was able to stay in Mississippi at that time with Mia and with my family from, I guess, March or April until October. And I was super anxious and nervous and hesitant about doing telehealth because I didn't know anything about it. I mean, I'm old. I can work a computer. I can send an email. I've got a little bit of, I know a little bit, but I was like, am I tech savvy enough to do this? And then I thought, this is a birth to three population, which early intervention, parent training, parent coaching. So it's not like the kid has to sit in front of the computer for an hour, which is what a lot of parents think. You know, how beneficial is that going to be? Is it going to work? But again, we didn't have a choice thanks to COVID. And so we did it. And what I found very quickly was that I had almost 100% attendance from families that had frequently canceled once or twice a month. Oh, today's not a good day. Oh, I didn't get the house cleaned up. Oh, we've got a runny nose. Oh, you've got a runny nose. So I found that doing the virtual with these little bitties, birth to three, some of them that had, pretty significant medical and health needs, maybe medically fragile, that we were still able to connect and we were still able to have those conversations and we were still able to learn and grow together to foster that child's development through the virtual telehealth. Fast forward, that goes well from April to October. Everything is great. And I'm thinking to myself, this telehealth, there's something to this. This is good and this is right and this works for me and it works for this population. So maybe I'll reach out to my recruiter and see if there's an opportunity to do this full time. Because the position that I was in Maryland, they did not want my position as a contractor to be full telehealth. And I really was getting to a point with my mother's health that her health was declining rapidly. And my brother was needing to support here at home with her because he works full time as a dentist and has lots of things going on. So I reached out to my recruiter on a Wednesday and said, hey, just, you know, I didn't even know if it was a possibility. On Friday, I had a contract. On Sunday, I flew from Baltimore, Maryland, all the way to California to do my background check, fingerprints, and all of that because you have to do that in California. And then on Monday, I flew all the way back to Baltimore, Maryland. And I think it was about a month later that I moved back full time to Mississippi. And it allowed me the opportunity to have the best of both worlds. My mother's health was declining. I was able to stay with her and keep her at home for probably 2.5 more years than she probably should have been. Provide those day-to-day things for her, handling her medications, her meals, and those kinds of things, taking her to appointments. And then I was still able to work full time. And I absolutely cannot imagine my life any other way. And that's really how I ended up here with AMN. That's how I ended up as a teletherapist. And then my recruiter apparently recommended me for the podcast, and I met with them back around Christmas. And initially, when I got the email, my first thought was like, "Yeah, I'm not doing that. There's no way that is not going to happen." And then I remembered that I am old, and I remembered that if my daughter were given the same opportunity and this was offered to her, and she said she didn't want to do it because it scared her, I would kick her in the butt and I'd be like, "No, you're doing it. You got to do it." And again, I'm nervous, but I'm excited and I think we're going to have a good time. I work a lot. I work every day. I'm very fortunate I'm not a morning person. My contract right now is on the Pacific time zone and I'm in Central, so I get to get started a little bit later in the day, which is awesome. I do finish a little bit later in the day, but that's okay. That doesn't bother me. But I love my job. I've not had this great feeling about my job in a long time. And honestly, before I joined AMN, I did not know that I could be this passionate. When I started working telehealth full time in the school system in California, I had never and at the time I'd been practicing 22 years, I had never in 22 years worked with a traditional general education student with articulation. Do I know how to fix an R? That's hard. Do I know how to fix a lateral lisp? I don't know. Maybe. Well, it turns out I did know. And it turns out I'm pretty good at my job. And it has been incredible to see the progress. Like I said, early on in my career, I got really burned out. But now I get up every day and I'm so excited to go to work. And now I've got an opportunity to join you on this podcast. So, along the way of my 25-year career, I have met some amazing professionals. And I will tell you, M my occupational therapy and physical therapy friends are the most brilliant friends that I have. They're so smart. All of my friends who are OTs and PTs should have gone to medical school. When my daughter was little, I would call my friend Laura. She's an OT. I'd be like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" I would call her before I would call my pediatrician because she's so smart. Brilliant. So I've got lots of people that I want to have on the show, and I've got lots of topics that I want to talk about. But I also want the topics First and foremost, I want this to be a fun place to come. I want us to laugh. I want us to have a good time. I want you to be able to ask questions, and I want you to be able to take away something from every single episode that we have that you can use. And I am super excited about learning because there are lots of things that I don't know about. Fluency, whew, super weak. I just am not comfortable doing it because I've not done it a lot. So that's really highlighted big on my to-do list, is to find an expert in the area of fluency that I can learn from. So I'm really excited about learning from professionals. I've got some friends that I'm going to have on the show that I'm super excited to introduce you guys to, and we're going to have fun. We're going to have a great time. When I'm not working, what am I doing? Hanging out with my daughter, hanging out with my sister-in-law, hanging out with my friends, watching college football. I'm, in the SEC, so it doesn't really get much better than that. If you know anything about Ole Miss and Oxford, Mississippi, you know that it truly is the velvet ditch. I'll let you guys try to figure out what that means. It really is the velvet ditch. And we've never lost a party. So you might see me drinking a beer, you might see me having a glass of champagne, and you might see me sipping on a little bit of tequila. But outside of work and outside of hanging out with my family and friends, I binge watch a lot of shows that I've watched over and over and over again. And my friend Shannon, who's going to be a guest on the show, she's a doctor, but I don't call her Dr. Shannon. She tells me that I watch shows over and over because I have anxiety. So I don't know. Maybe we'll touch on that on one of our podcasts. But anyway, it's been great talking to you guys today. I hope you've learned a little bit about me. And I hope that this show and this podcast can be a place where you can come, where you can learn, but most importantly, where you can laugh. Thank you for tuning in to SLP Full Disclosure. You can learn more about this episode and our show on our website at amnhealthcare.com. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform. You can also find show updates and SLP opportunities on our Instagram at AMN Allied. Special thanks to AMN Healthcare for making this show possible. See y'all next time.